answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
I woke up this morning, got myself a gun. Mama always said I'd be the chosen one.
Breaking news this morning, President Trump arriving back in the U.S. just a short time ago after abruptly leaving the G7 summit in Canada early. And he had a stark message for Iran as that country's conflict with Israel escalates. He's not interested in a ceasefire. He wants a, quote, real end to Iran's nuclear program. Here's what he told reporters on Air Force One just moments ago.
What specifically is better than a ceasefire? What are you looking for here?
An end, a real end, not a ceasefire. An end.
So something that would be permanent.
Yeah, or giving up entirely. That's okay too.
Are you close there? Is that possible? Is that possible in the next 24,
Why
48
not?
hours?
Certainly possible. Complete give up. That's possible. Yeah.
I know that it's difficult to hear as it's recorded on Air Force One, but President Trump says, I'm no longer interested in a ceasefire. I want a real end to this war. And that means Iran needs to, one, simply give up, or Israel can go all the way in. And Trump added this later, warning Khomeini, the Ayatollah, the religious leader of Iran, stating, and I'm quoting, I know where you are. I know where you are. I have no doubt Israeli intel has with precision located Khomeini and those around him. They have just been holding back hitting him because the attitude of President Trump, and I tend to agree, he is a religious leader, not, quote, the leader of the nation, although he is by de facto, and going after him would look like a war against religion. We're at a point where I don't care, though. Their religion needs to be wiped out when it comes to destroying Western civilization and killing every American, Jewish or not. If that's their religion, I'm ready to put an end to it. Now, if they want to go back to the Quran and look for the good parts of the Quran and the Muslim faith, where they look to help and share love, great. But to have a terror like this continue to exist in the world, and the possibility that even if they don't have a nuclear weapon now, they might someday down the road, at what point? Maybe during your grandchildren's lives or their grandchildren's lives. You cannot have a regime like this in control of anything that deadly, that devastating. So when Trump says, I'm through looking for a ceasefire, we need this to end. And then for Khomeini to hear, I know where you are. And I'll give you a perfect example. Khomeini had just appointed a new minister of military, a new wartime chief of staff, becoming this country's most senior military leader. You know how long he's had that job? You know how he got the job? He got the job because the previous senior commander was killed 4 days ago. And so now he's got the job. And he's been killed 4 days later. You think they don't know where these targets are, how to get to them? Of course they do. And that's why there probably is dissension inside, although you're not going to hear it for a while. Maybe in years to come we'll hear the inside story. But inside Khomeini's surroundings and the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, they know they are marked for death unless they change. Thanks for joining us, hour number one. Larry Connors USA. We're here every Monday through Friday for you from 6 to 8 p.m. And reminding you, when we're on the air, we are streaming video. You can watch the program. Very easy to do so. Go to NewsTalkSTL Rumble, Facebook, or Twitter. Larry Connors USA, Rumble, or Facebook. And everything goes up as a podcast, video and audio, when we complete. So if you can't stay with us the entire hour, and I understand that, You've got a life to live and other things to worry about, but you can always pull up the podcast, one at NewsTalkSTL, LarryConnersUSA.com, Larry Connors USA Facebook. And as I said, that includes the audio and the video. And then push share. Send it on to others. And reminding you, wherever you are, you can use our app, NewsTalk STL app, absolutely free. Download it on your phone. You push a button and you're listening to whatever we are playing on air at that moment, even though you're well beyond our radio signals. We got 2 great FM signals, but the FCC limits the power. As I mentioned to you before, I've got a daughter in Florida. That's how she listens to the program on a regular basis. And so can you, wherever you are. And pull up previous podcasts using that same app. And with News Talk STL, you get news, analysis, opinion. As you do with Larry Connors USA, news, analysis, opinion, and education. We're going to make sure you know more when we finish this hour than you did when we began. An update for you with Chris and Becky Arps. Chris Arps, of course, is one of our show hosts here on before this program comes on with Speaker Tim Jones, the Jones and Arps Show. They were in Israel a day before the bombings and attacks started. They are out of harm's way. I cannot give you more details than that to say that they're out of harm's way. Thank God that's prayer answered. Now, there are a lot of other Americans probably still in Israel somewhere. Pray for their safety. In fact, pray for all of them. Pray for the safety of the innocents of the Iranians that are caught in the midst of this, just like the Palestinians were caught in the midst when they were going after Hamas. Not everybody in Iran is a enemy. In fact, many of them, back in the 60s and even 70s, they loved America. They were wanting to become more westernized. But then when they took over our embassy, and from that point forward, installing the Ayatollah and the religious leaders, severe Sharia law was enforced to the extent that women would be flogged if they were seen even looking at another man. And they were not allowed to speak, and they weren't even supposed to hear another man's voice. And children that have a chance for an education since 79, they've not been taught anything but Sharia law. Iran, at this point, I told you where Trump is, at saying, I'm no longer interested in simply a ceasefire. I want to bring it to an end. The Israeli Defense Operative Chief has said, we will not stop fighting Iran until we've destroyed the Iranian regime's ballistic missiles and its nuclear facilities. And they've been targeting them, and they're going to continue to do so. And when it comes to dealing with Iran, a question was raised again for the president.
Have you heard any signals or seen any messages from intermediaries that Iran wishes to de-escalate the conflict?
Yeah,
What have you heard? What have you heard from the Iranians?
they'd like to talk, but they should have done that before. I had 60 days, and they had 60 days, and on the 61st day, I said, we don't have a deal. They have to make a deal, and it's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war. And they should talk, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
It may already be too late. If Trump is now at a point that says, we want this to end, we're no longer interested in just a ceasefire, we want full stop. And as I said, Israel announcing today that it's killed the new wartime chief of staff. What a great job to have in Iran. He's out, you're up, you're the next chief of staff. Khomeini chose this chief of staff because he was one of the ones closest to him that was high-ranking, that he still trusted. He's running out of people to trust. He's running out of people to even be in position. Khomeini is in his 80s and apparently is suffering some illnesses of various type, perhaps pancreatic cancer. That's been reported in a couple of cases. So he may not care what happens to him, but he's trying to destroy all of his people in the process. And we're going to do what we can to get inside and clean them up. One of the things we need to do is get to part of the nuclear development that's buried deep in the mountains. A spokesman for the Defense of Democracy says, here are the weapons we have in play and what we need to do.
Iran has not only threatened to go after U.S. forces and our Gulf allies, it's hit our Gulf allies before in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE. And so our Gulf allies are afraid that Iran is going to use these missiles to attack them.
So we're worried about our troops in Iraq. We're worried about our troops in Qatar. I got it. But do you think that they would hit a Gulf state in order to, I guess, throw it off, put pressure on other countries to stop Israel from hitting them?
Not only do I think so, they've actually threatened to do so, and they've already done so. So that's exactly the way that they want to involve the Gulf allies, put pressure on the Gulf allies, and try to deter our involvement.
So you hear about ballistic missiles. What does Iran have? Is Israel surprised by the number that they have? Here's a look of, if you're going to go shopping, this is what Israel has put on their Amazon account. What rockets should we be thinking about, and what do you think is key for what these rockets are capable of?
Well, first of all, anything that is nuclear capable is defined as a 500-kilogram payload delivered over 300 kilometers. So that's nuclear capable. If these missiles get into Israel, and if the Iranians were developing nuclear warheads, which is exactly what Israeli intelligence said they were going to do, they could deliver not just a conventional payload, but a nuclear payload. And they've got these from the Chinese, the North Koreans, and the Russians.
Yeah, so they've got them, and they can use them. Now, the bunker buster bomb, we are the only nation that has a plane big enough to carry this bomb, and we will probably end up using it if we need to, if they're not going to cease firing. That's the only way to get deep inside the mountain where they've been building additional nuclear material. Turning the corner on another subject briefly, the mass roundup of illegals continues, and in some cases we continue to see violence. You can leave it to the left to find someone to blame. California Congressman Torres.
I am demanding full accountability and reimbursement for the local costs incurred, including injuries to local officers and damages caused by the chaos unleashed when the Trump administration recklessly deploy the military and ICE agents into our communities. They are the ones who created this unrest, and they are the ones that need to foot the bill.
How delusional do you have to be? That is a California representative. That's how delusional. Trump is the reason we're spending so much money and people have been hurt, and that they are causing the unrest. If you didn't have the unrest, you wouldn't have the police in force, and you wouldn't have the federal agents coming in to get the illegals. And you're going to hear the same story from Chicago Mayor Bass and also Chicago Mayor Johnson, I should say, and L.A. Mayor Bass.
But the real solution of all of this is for the administration to stop the raids. We have heard that these raids might take place for the next 30 days. We don't know how many are going to take place in a given day. And you just think about the disruption to families and the disruption to our local economy.
Yeah, let me just first acknowledge the level of anxiety and fear and trepidation that this administration has caused. You've never seen a society improve or expand under this type of fear. And we're going to continue to resist, and we're going to do it in many different ways, whether it's taken to the streets or to the courts or policy. One of the things that I am very proud of is that we are a welcoming city, which means our local law enforcement do not dub or behave as federal ICE agents. And so our local law enforcement, as we continue to rebuild and expand trust amongst all of our residents, it's important that we hold that line.
Blah, blah, blah. Now, who pays for all of this? Here's an example.
$2.5 billion. That's how much Illinois is projected to spend on migrants by the end of 2025, according to a new audit. But taxpayers are calling out the governor, J.B. Pritzker, for putting the needs of illegals over his own citizens. Chicago resident and director of the Community Roundtable, Kata Truss, is one of those taxpayers. She joins me now. To me, the key line of the audit is this, Kata. In 2023 alone, total costs outpaced expected spending by over $400 million, enough money to shelter Illinois' entire homeless population for a year. What do you think of your governor prioritizing illegals over your friends and neighbors who are citizens, but who are also in need?
Well, I've been very vocal about how I feel about it. I've been very vocal about the fact that this Illinois governor has neglected both our Chicago public schools, our citizens of the city, as well as the state of Illinois. What we are afraid of, what the taxpayers of Illinois are afraid of, is the fact that there is going to be a $3.2 billion budget deficit for the state of Illinois heading toward the year 2026.
In other words, there's another train coming down the track. The same Chicago resident points out the governor doesn't seem to understand.
They continue to double down and make it seem as if they did something to be commended about, and they have not. And the people are going to show them this at election time.
J.B. Pritzker doubling down just last week on your state's sanctuary city policies. Listen to this.
I will stand in the way of Tom Homan going after people who don't deserve to be frightened in their communities, who don't deserve to be threatened, terrorized. I would rather that he came and arrested me than do that to the people of my state.
Kata, as you know, so much is wrong in that statement, especially the fact that these are not people of his state, but the people of a foreign state that he is wasting your taxpayer dollars on. If I were an Illinois resident, I would be livid, Kata.
And we are livid. And let me tell you something. We are not insensitive to undocumented persons here. We know that it is a struggle. I get people asking me all the time, well, do you think it's wrong for people to want to live the American dream? No, it's not wrong for people to want to live the American dream. But what is wrong is for Americans here in America to not be able to realize the American dream, because we have elected officials who want to do things with our money that does not benefit the people who are paying into the tax bracket.
Amen, amen, amen. Coming up, will the left accept any blame for the violence across the nation? You know the answer, but we're going to break it down anyway. Lock and load. Ready on the right.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
In all these years that Wellington Environmental has been my sponsor, I've never mentioned their duct cleaning services. Allergy season is here, and Wellington crews clean air ducts daily in homes and commercial buildings, also cleaning air handling units and diffusers in commercial facilities. Why? Well, because people will see black dirt and mold on the vents, or they are actually suffering from allergies. Don't be fooled by low-cost duct cleaning providers saying they charge only per vent, because once they get on site, the price will skyrocket. Wellington does not do this, never has. Wellington will give you an estimate, and you say Larry Connors, and immediately you get a 20% discount. Call Cindy, 314-644-4930. 314-644-4930. Make your home and business better, safer with Wellington. Be well with Wellington. Ackerman Toyota is number one in sales for 2024. That is 2 years in a row. It's really no surprise. Ackerman has the largest customer lounge where you can relax, take your time choosing new or premium pre-owned. Ackerman at Hampton and 44. AckermanToyota.com. Thank you for making Ackerman Toyota number one 2 years in a row. AckermanToyota.com. Ackerman Toyota for life. John Bill Roofing reminds you we are in the stormy season, and that means if you have even the smallest leak in your roof, you could soon have a much bigger issue. Call the John Bill to make sure that your biggest investment is protected. That call can save you major dollars. If you do get hit during a storm, John Bill has a rapid response team. Call 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF, John Bill. The Oak Street Inn and Lounge has some great news. The Speakeasy will now be open on Sundays, starting at 2. Open to the public. Great for those in the industry who'll want to enjoy a Sunday fun day. Plus, enjoy sushi and cocktails. What more could you want? You want to make sure you get the code. And how do you get the code to the Speakeasy? You go to the Facebook, Oak Street Inn and Lounge Facebook. I'll see you at Oak Street Inn and Lounge in Cottleville.
This is News Talk STL.
Had me, girl, taught me those things a young man should know. Down on my knees and begging I plead to learn a little bit more. Oh, that woman taught me to pray. I saw heaven every day, and all she could.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
There was a state representative, Democratic leader of the state legislature in Minnesota killed over the weekend, a state senator shot. How would you describe the current political atmosphere in this country this morning?
I feel like Trump has really popped the lid off the rhetoric and the sense of hate and violence and promoted this type of an environment. It's profoundly disturbing for all of us. We have seen increased threats across the country. You're probably familiar with the pizza threats. We've seen more of that where pizzas or other food is delivered to people's families that they haven't ordered. Just to say from the right wing, we know who you are, we know where you live. I can tell you all of our families feel a greatly heightened sense. And just let me just say, my heart goes out to the families in Minnesota. How horrific for the whole country, but in particularly we're holding the folks in Minnesota in our hearts.
Well, that sounds very good and calming. Senator Merkley of Oregon. And yeah, we should hold those who are hurting and suffering and the victims of those killed by this crazed man the other day in Minnesota, creating the largest manhunt in Minnesota history. And they finally found him hiding on the ground in some weeds. Big coward. Guns down 2 people, including a state legislator and her spouse, and then goes after another state legislator and his spouse, wounds them, then escapes again. And yet here you have the Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley saying, well, Trump has blown the lid off this. He's created all this new violence. May I remind you of something? Butler, Pennsylvania. Do you remember what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania? Someone nearly assassinated Trump. Do you hear the left and the legacy media even mention that story anymore? No, it's buried under the L.A., not riots, but standing our ground against the stormtroopers from the Trump administration. It's buried under the No Kings Parade, the assassination attempt of a sitting president basically ignored by the legacy media. And yet here you have an Oregon senator, Democrat, saying Trump blew the lid off this. He created all this new violence. What, because he survived the assassination attempt? How do you blame Trump for having someone try to assassinate him? Are you going to justify it? It sounds to me like you would. I don't like the fact that a state legislator was killed, and her husband as well, and another state legislator and spouse attacked. Even though they're leftists, they're Democrats, they're Minnesota, I still don't like that. Anyone with compassion, with truly a heart, would not like it. Anyone for law and justice would not like it. But I would not turn around and start excusing it by, it's got to be Trump. Trump had not a damn thing to do with it. We still don't know that much about the shooter. We know that he was appointed not once but twice by Minnesota Governor Walz to a state commission. So it sounds to me like he was in pretty good with the Democrats as well. There are stories popping up everywhere. Well, he took a turn. He was a priest at one point in the Congo, and it came back. Something triggered him. That's obvious. But when you want to lay all the blame at the foot of Donald Trump and those who support him for the violence that's happening and ignore the other, let me give you another example. A more recent example, which I have not seen yet reported in the legacy media. There's a Democrat lawmaker in North Carolina. You know what she did? Well, she's getting a lot of heat for a social media post she put up. Yeah, she's anti-Trump. Can't deny that. But she put up a violent image depicting a severed head resembling Donald Trump. What is the justification for that? We saw that with Kathy Lee Griffin, the so-called comedian, when Trump was running, holding up what appeared to be the severed head. And she got castigated, lost a lot of her performances that were scheduled, and she blamed Trump because she got canceled, ignoring what she did in advance. So here you have State Representative Julie Von Hoffen, North Carolina, posting a photo of a woman at an anti-Trump rally, No Kings protest, in Raleigh. And it showed an individual holding a sign with a guillotine. The banner was flanked by two severed heads. One of them looked like the president. And this state representative wanted to post it thinking basically, this is great. The sign read, in these difficult times, some cuts may be necessary. That's a call for violence, the direct violence. There's a member of the 20-plus year member of the Coast Guard that's also being charged, investigated for making a threat against Trump as well lately. Trump has already survived 2 assassination attempts in 2024, prior to winning the election, obviously. But here you have this group in North Carolina believing that this is good. This is good that somebody's holding up a severed head. Some cuts are necessary. And they're talking about cutting off the head of Trump. This goes back also to James Comey and his wife with the walk on the beach, finding those shells that basically said, eliminate Trump, assassinate Trump, kill the president. Not in so many words, but the meaning was clear. Although Comey, former FBI agent director, thought, oh, that's interesting. I have no idea what that means. I'll put it up on my social media. And immediately he started hearing others know what it means. And you should have. If you didn't, you never should have been in charge of the FBI. 8647. Eliminate Trump. But Representative Julie Von Hoffen of North Carolina was talking about the No Kings protest in Raleigh, saying it was an amazing turnout, including this event, hosted by Wake Dems and North Carolina Democrats, and then showing a picture of the guillotine and the heads on either side, one of them resembling Trump. Her county Republican representative said, this is why reasonable people are leaving the Democrat Party in North Carolina. This is a sitting state legislator who is publicly applauding the beheading of President Trump just hours after a state legislator in our country, and her spouse were murdered in cold blood. Yes, he's talking about the case in Minnesota. By the way, Trump said today he does not really care about calling Minnesota Governor Tim Walz about the shooting of the two state Democrats. He said, I don't want to call him. Trump said he appointed this guy, talking about the man who went on the killing spree. He worked on a state board of business owners, consulting lawmakers, and Minnesota Governor Walz put him on that board 2 different times. And Trump said, I think the governor of Minnesota is so whacked out, I'm not calling him. Why would I call him? I could call and say, hey, how are you doing? The guy has no clue. Again, I'm quoting Trump. He's a mess. I could be nice and call, but why waste time? And, of course, the response from Minnesota and the governor is, oh, we had a tragedy here, and you don't seem to care about our tragedy. You know what is getting more coverage of that on CNN? They point out there's another disturbing twist to the story. The state legislator who was killed and her spouse had a dog. And for some reason, I guess no one was willing to step forward and take care of the dog. And somebody made the decision to euthanize the dog. Now, you think, again, they're going to blame the man who did the actual shooting? Or they're going to, again, blame Trump. He's killing dogs now. You think I'm twisted in that speaking? I don't think so. In fact, I don't think I can keep up with all the twists and turns they want to come up with. We try. We get pretty sick trying, but we try. Coming up before we wrap up, the race to artificial intelligence, why we must win that race.
You can connect with Larry on Twitter at Larry Connors USA.
I've got a phone number for you and a website where you can take a free, quick survey to learn how to use artificial intelligence, AI, to put your company on a fast track to the future. Here's the number. It's a 636 area code, 636-689-0545. 689-0545. This is PRI Global. And recently, the St. Louis Business Journal named PRI Global as a leading IT consulting company. 25 years working with hundreds of companies, several Fortune 500, locally and around the world. PRI Global has its own AI lab to develop what's best for your company. Take the free survey and be on your way to the future. 636-689-0545. 689-0545. Or go direct PRIGlobal.ai. PRIGlobal.ai. You want the best place to watch baseball or any sport and be able to enjoy premium cigars and whiskeys? Lit Cigar Lounge. Lit has so many events each month. You need to constantly check the Lit Cigar Lounge Facebook. You don't want to miss anything. Plus, you can order food from Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta, delivered within minutes right to your table. By the way, we're in the season for great patio dining. Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta has your table waiting. Since 1995, Renewal by Andersen has helped St. Louis homeowners upgrade with windows and doors. Now it's our 30th anniversary sale. You'll get $1,995 off every project. No gimmicks, real savings, and the nation's best warranty. The offer ends June 30th, so you don't want to wait. There are some restrictions. Visit rbastl.com. Renewal by Andersen. Superior products, exceptional service. Hey, if you're 50 or older, you do not want to take any risk with your money. In fact, you want Leslie Consulting. My friend Bob Leslie can show you a gain and retain plan. It means that you never lose. Plus, you get up to a 20% bonus on day one. Leslie Consulting, a leader in brokerage and risk management. 314-721-0066. LeslieConsulting.com.
This is News Talk STL. This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
Well, speaking of money, you leave it to CNN to take a small number and balloon it into a massive, scary, frightening story. Headline from CNN: Americans cut back sharply on their spending last month amid the tariffs. You see how they put that together? Americans are cutting back on their spending and cutting back sharply. And it's all because of Trump and the tariffs. That headline alone said, oh, my God, I mean, it's not working. We're in deep, deep doo-doo, aren't we? And it's getting deeper. It's a lie. It is a lie. In fact, if you bother to get into the details, they can't hide the lie. They've got to put the actual facts of the numbers up. Here's what they're saying. And I'm going to read the story in full here for a moment. Not in full, but the pertinent part here. Americans are feeling a hangover from their tariff-fueled buying frenzy early in the spring. Are you feeling a hangover? Did you go out and do all kinds of crazy buying in the spring? Did you? Did you have the money? Are you suffering a hangover because you didn't? Well, that was your decision, wasn't it? The second sentence of that story reads, retail sales fell by 0.9% in May from the prior month. Now, a 0.9% sounds small, but overall across the economy, it's a big number. But they say it fell 0.9% in May compared to April, down sharply from April's 0.1% decline. Okay, simple math. Regardless of how big those point numbers amount to, you have 0.1 and you have a 0.9. That sounds like a major drop-off, right? But we're not done. This was the sharpest monthly decline since January and worse than the 0.7 decrease economists had projected in a poll previously. What caused the drop-off? They have a picture with their story of a woman in looks like a shopping store, grocery store, in the cereal counter or something of that nature, suggesting your food cost. Frightening, huh? Well, that's not the story, because what it amounts to, the drop, and they have to admit it, was mostly due in plummeting car sales. Car sales. You take those purchases out, retail sales were down a more modest 0.3%. So you went from 0.9% to 0.3% when you take the car sale factor out. Car sales are still big. We want our car dealers in America to do well. But if folks are going to tighten their strings, maybe we're not going to buy that new car right now or a car right now, or even a used car. But they threw it in there. They do it in the same way that when they come up with their core index to talk about how bad inflation is, they want you to think it's not so bad. They take out fuel and groceries to make it look better. There are concerns about, is the Fed going to change anything or not? We're about 4.1, 4.2%. Unemployment remaining around the same number. There's been no real jump in inflation. Trump would like to see the Fed act a little bit. If they did, it might spur the car sales and home sales. They go into their report. They say retail spending was down across most categories last month, especially at car dealerships. Car and car parts declining 3.5%, the largest monthly decline since June 2024. That just means cars that are available will cost more for a period of time until more get online. Some dealers and car makers are able to absorb it, going to be fine with it. Others might feel a pinch for a while. And, of course, if you're not selling cars, maybe you're not selling as much gasoline. But they want to frighten you and say, things are looking bad. It's all because you guys, you wanted Trump to have his tariffs. And it's only going to get worse. Then we have stories coming out again about the illegals, the cost of illegals in our nation. You already know that it's costing the American taxpayer money that they could have in their pocket, or they could be used to help Americans instead of illegals. We all know that. You heard the woman from Chicago earlier in this hour pointing out our governor doesn't care about helping the people of America. She said, we care about, quote, as she called them, undocumented, but not at the expense of Americans. Isn't that what it really comes down to? You can care about someone and their family and genuinely care. But if a choice has to be made, do they get what they want or do you get what you need for your family? Where are you going to make your decision? The leftist Marxists would say, let's put it all together in one bag and then we'll dole it out gradually to who we like. And then we have a report from some of these media. They're saying it would help if Trump would let folks know where they're going to carry out ICE raids. Oh, yeah, I would. Yeah, it'd give them more time to cover. But they're saying you should let everybody know you're coming in. They're absolutely asking for that. Now, there's been a concern about immigration raids at farms, hotels, and restaurants. DHS reversing course based on Trump's decision, allowing immigration raids to resume. The other day, Trump said, let's back off of those. They're not the real threat. But at the same time, he's trying to appease farmers and those who rely on immigration labor right now, even if it's illegal. In fact, as it's pointed out in Politico, Trump's vow to focus mass deportations in Democrat-led cities reveals a crack in his plans to fulfill his top campaign priority. For months, he's promised to deport millions of undocumented immigrants, that is illegal, write it correctly, deport illegals across the country. But then last week, an immigration enforcement group hit rural communities, raids at farms in California, a meatpacking plant in Nebraska, a dairy in New Mexico, and Trump was faced with raw criticism from Republican lawmakers and a spook ag secretary who's really trying to say we're going to need some of these people. And Trump's trying to juggle a combination of political pressures and policy issues. If they're here illegally, they will have to go. But he's trying to reinforce, go after the worst of the worst. And as I pointed out to you the other day, it's 50, maybe 49 to 50% of ag workers in our nation, ag and meat butchering house workers are illegals. They are. But they are about less than 4%, maybe 5% of the total number of illegals in the nation. It's easy to find them. You go to a farm, there they are. You go to the butchering, slaughtering house, there they are. You go raiding a townhome or rather an apartment complex in Chicago, they're all over the place. You might get some, you might not. But they're suggesting, look, if you would let us know when you're coming, it would make things, what, easier to escape? That what you're trying to suggest? Yesterday, Trump stated Biden allowed 21 million to come into our country. And of that number, vast numbers of those people were murderers, killers, people from gangs, people from jails. They emptied their jails into the U.S. Most of those people are in the cities, the blue cities, and that's correct. These are not the kind that want to go work on a farm. They're more into stealing and grabbing and killing to get what they want. If they have a knife in their pocket, it's not to cut grapes from the vine. It's to cut you. The president obviously wants to crack down on illegal immigration. It's a balancing act as to what the farmers need. He's trying to show, I have your concerns at heart too. But in the midst of some of the farm, you might well have some illegals who are guilty of numerous crimes. Now, if you're going to believe the report that's coming out from some of the leftist sources, out of those arrested so far, less than 20% have any violent record that we know of. That should be emphasized, that we know of. That doesn't mean they have not committed violent crimes once they got here or had not done that elsewhere. Nobody documented it. All right, coming up, artificial intelligence is a new battlefield for us. One expert says the U.S. needs to do this and be on top of it. Look at it as our moonshot. In other words, we must succeed in winning artificial intelligence in that war. That story when we continue.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
The Napoli heritage of fine dining continues with Napoli Kirkwood. Napoli Kirkwood, now open. So add that to Cafe Napoli in Clayton, Napoli 2 in Town and Country, Napoli 3 in St. Charles, right next door to Napoli C, and don't forget about Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in the district, Chesterfield Valley. All of those locations, plus now, open, Napoli Kirkwood.
This is Larry Connors, USA. Larry Connors, USA.
In the early days of the internet, the House and the Senate came together and said, look, we want to grow this technology. We want to make sure American internet standards become the global standards. And so they prohibited internet taxes by the states. Fast forward 20 years, America's internet is the global standard. So we have right now a modern day moonshot moment for the president and the Congress. They can put an American innovation strategy front and center that helps accelerate AI development, that helps build the technology talent pool of the future, that invests in our infrastructure, and also spreads American AI across the globe. If they do those four things, it will fundamentally change the balance of power towards America for the next 50 years. But if we don't do it, China is going to seize that moment.
China will seize the moment. They're already doing it. That is the CEO of American Edge. You know, we have one of my sponsors, PRI Global, Artificial Intelligence. They have their own lab here in St. Louis, and they're developing different projects and products all the time for businesses here and beyond the borders here. And they've acknowledged as well that, you know, it's a constant rush to get something out and then make sure it's not stolen from you, as it would be from the Chinese. China is making rapid advancements in artificial intelligence, trying to become a global leader by 2030. Pardon me. And keep in mind, this means China, the government, and its money is going into it. My sponsor, PRI Global, is like other AI companies across the nation. They're doing it on their own. They're not getting multi-millions and billions of dollars from the government to help push them forward. They're doing it on their own, the old-fashioned way. China is going to use that delay time and jump ahead. The spokesman for the American Edge Group is correct. This should be our moonshot. Want to put a man on the moon? We want to put America first when it comes to artificial intelligence. But right now, China is actively developing it, obviously for national security, surveillance, defense, and everything they can to dig into what we have in this country. As I said, their plan, their ambitious goal, and it's not out of stretch and not out of reach, is that they will do it by 2030. There's your warning time, and that time could be quickly shortened. They're concentrating on AI applications and everything from manufacturing to traffic management, healthcare, education, and more importantly, surveillance. And then you have the issue with the chips. China is accelerating its own chip development programs. They want to be ahead. They want to lead the world, and they're putting Chinese money behind it. Not private investors, not companies, but government money. Where are we on that picture? We're going to be in the rearview mirror if we're not careful. Coming up, an update on the Iran-Israeli part, and Donald Trump tells the Khomeini, I know where you are. Remember our pledge, one nation under God.
You can hear podcasts of this program at Larry Connors USA Facebook. Larry Connors USA Facebook.
John Bill Roofing reminds you we are in the stormy season, and that means if you have even the smallest leak in your roof, you could soon have a much bigger issue. Call the John Bill to make sure that your biggest investment is protected. That call can save you major dollars. If you do get hit during a storm, John Bill has a rapid response team. Call 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF. 1-800-NEW-ROOF, John Bill. You and I might have something in common, back pain. I can tell you where I go for help, Esquire Sports Medicine, the spine of St. Louis. They can put athletes back on the field so they can clearly help us. Esquire Sports Medicine, hands-on chiropractic help on Big Bend, just north of Highway 40, 314-644-0885, EsquireSportsMedicine.com, EsquireSportsMedicine.com. Great patio season to enjoy any of the Cafe Napoli locations. How about the Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in Chesterfield? Enjoying coal-fired pizza, nothing else like it. Napoli Brothers Pizza and Pasta in Chesterfield. A few doors down, Lit Cigar Lounge, where you can enjoy premium cigars and whiskeys. Check the Lit Cigar Lounge Facebook for details, plus gift cards for friends. I'll see you at Lit Cigar Lounge in Chesterfield. Ackerman Toyota is #1 in sales for 2024. That is 2 years in a row. It's really no surprise. Ackerman has the largest customer lounge where you can relax, take your time choosing new or premium pre-owned. Ackerman at Hampton and 44. AckermanToyota.com. Thank you for making Ackerman Toyota #1 2 years in a row. AckermanToyota.com. Ackerman Toyota for life. It's that time of season when families, businesses are moving. For local or long distance, I endorse McGuire Moving. Get a date set soon before the schedules are booked. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. McGuire is constantly giving back to our veterans, such as support dogs for our brave. So with McGuire, you're getting excellent service and helping our vets. McGuireMoving.com. So many times, Vincent's Jewelers has helped me surprise someone special. Vincent's locally owned can do the same for you, and you don't have to break the bank to get something really nice, maybe even customized. The smile you're going to get back from that special someone, priceless. Check VincentsJewelers.com every day because new items are arriving and there are special deals. Vincent's, my only jeweler. VincentsJewelers.com. VincentsJewelers.com. I can tell you how to get a free quick quiz to see how artificial intelligence can boost your company's potential. You go to PRIglobal.ai. PRIglobal.ai. St. Louis Business Magazine listing PRI as one of the leading IT companies. And PRI has its own AI lab to develop what your business needs. PRIglobal.ai. PRIglobal.ai.
This is News Talk STL.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
This is the 1,000-pound bomb in the room right now because there's two sides to this story. The instability of what happens and what can Iran do? And that's the question. Will we have a spike in oil price? If we drop that bomb on this facility, and we just don't know if it's going to take it out or not, and I say we, is that a Western coalition? Does everybody agree on this? Or is this just an American-Israel mandate? I mean, these are huge questions that are up. And if I were the Iranian people right now, I think I'd ask myself, is this good policy my government's putting forward, or should we cut a deal el pronto before we get wiped out here? Because I think part of what Israel's trying to do is destabilize that, it's obvious, and get the Iranian people to do what the Arab Spring was years ago. And all of that's destabilizing for markets. And so I'd like to see this get out of the way because the economy's doing quite well now. I don't wish a bomb that size to fall on anybody, but that's what's being held out there right now. That's what you and I are talking about. That's what the market's watching by the hour. And by Trump getting on that plane and leaving Alberta, that pushed up the rhetoric.
It did. That's Kevin O'Leary talking about the mother of all bombs, basically, that could be used in Iran to get into these areas deep in the mountains where the Iranians have been building some of their nuclear arsenal. This is an area known as Fodor. It is Iran's so-called secret, but everybody seems to know about it, but heavily guarded nuclear site that supposedly is near impossible to destroy because it's buried so deep into the mountains. You have to have a specific bomb. It has to penetrate a certain depth, then explode. It can't explode on contact with the earth. It's got to go into the earth and explode at a deeper level. We have the bomb capable of doing that. Iran knows we do. Israel doesn't have it. So if it's used, it will be because we gave it to Israel, but they don't even have a plane big enough to carry it. It'd have to be one of our stealth bombers. So the U.S. would be directly involved in going after that facility in Iran. I have no issue with it. I have no issue. We need to wipe out all of their nuclear capability. And on top of that, Trump said, direct statement to Khomeini, we know where you're hiding, and our patience is running thin. Welcome aboard hour number 2, Larry Connors USA, and reminding you when we're on the air, we are streaming video. You can watch the program, and glad to have you on board. I salute you. Always welcome you in. How do you watch? Well, you go to NewsTalkSTL Rumble, Facebook or Twitter, Larry Connors USA Rumble, Facebook, and everything goes up as a podcast later at LarryConnorsUSA.com, NewsTalkSTL podcast, and Larry Connors USA Facebook. But when we're on the air from 6 to 8 right now, you can watch the program. If you can't do it now, you can pull it up later. And with Larry Connors USA, you are going to get news, analysis, opinion, and education. You will leave each hour with more information than you had when we started. In fact, more details on this secretive and yet widely known Iranian nuclear site. Let me add a point of good news, and that is that Chris and Becky Arps are out of Israel. Chris and Becky had gone into Israel on a Holy Land tour and had just arrived the day before or the day of when the bombings started. I think they spent their first night having to run to a bunker, a shelter. They are now out of harm's way. But there are many other Americans still behind. So keep them in your prayers. Keep all the Israelis in your prayers. Keep all of those, even the Iranians who are not active in anything other than they're just being subjected to what their leaders are trying to cause and destroying others, that they in turn are being destroyed. And what kind of bombs and weapons would be used? Now, we talked about the mother of all bombs. We've heard that phrase before, but this is a massive weapon. There are apparently, where this Fort-Dow fuel enrichment plant is, based on satellite imagery, 5 tunnels that go deep into a group of mountains. They have a wide security perimeter, heavily guarded. How big it is not sure, but it first became public in 2009. Israeli intel got some Iranian documents years ago, stole them, and understands the main halls are something like 260 to 290 feet below the ground, safe from any aerial bomb known to be possessed by Israel. But as I said, we do have it, and we could certainly do it for Israel. And Trump has said again today to the Ayatollah, my patience is running thin. We know where you are. And Trump has said also, I'm not interested in a ceasefire anymore. I want to put an end to all of this. And then, of course, we have the other bombs and munitions in play. Here's a spokesman for the Defense of Democracy.
Iran has not only threatened to go after U.S. forces and our Gulf allies, it's hit our Gulf allies before in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE. And so our Gulf allies are afraid that Iran is going to use these missiles to attack them.
So we're worried about our troops in Iraq. We're worried about our troops in Qatar. I got it. But do you think that they would hit a Gulf state in order to, I guess, throw it off, put pressure on other countries to stop Israel from hitting them?
Not only do I think so, they've actually threatened to do so, and they've already done so. So that's exactly the way that they want to involve the Gulf allies, put pressure on the Gulf allies, and try to deter our involvement.
So you hear about ballistic missiles. What does Iran have? Is Israel surprised by the number that they have? Here's a look of, if you're going to go shopping, this is what Israel has put on their Amazon account. What rockets should we be thinking about, and what do you think is key for what these rockets are capable of?
Well, first of all, anything that is nuclear capable is defined as a 500-kilogram payload delivered over 300 kilometers. So that's nuclear capable. If these missiles get into Israel, and if the Iranians were developing nuclear warheads, which is exactly what Israeli intelligence said they were going to do, they could deliver not just a conventional payload, but a nuclear payload. And they've got these from the Chinese, the North Koreans, and the Russians.
Yeah. The enemies of our enemy supplying them. And we're aware of it. Let me go back to some of the details about this, quote, secretive nuclear site, which is not so much of a secret. As I said, the Israeli intel got hold of some Iranian documents years ago. And back in 2000, then President Barack Obama said, the size and configuration of this facility is inconsistent with a peaceful program. He acknowledged that in 2000, and yet later he wanted to sign off on a deal that Iran could go ahead and do what they wanted, and they would not have a nuclear weapon on his watch. Well, of course, not on his watch, but they would be working on it. When he's already acknowledged what they have in this Fordow plant is inconsistent with a peaceful program. What kind of idiocy decides we know it's inconsistent? They could be building weapons, but we're going to let it go for now. The head of the Washington, D.C.-based Institute for Science and International Security said Fordow is actually a project that started during what we call the crash nuclear weapons program of the early 2000s. The idea was the Iranians could make weapon-grade uranium in that plant, and then they would obtain low-enriched uranium from the civil nuclear program in Iran. Yeah, they would be building something to help their people, but they would really be building something to destroy Western civilization. And, of course, Israel to begin with. Question for President Trump.
Have you heard any signals or seen any messages from intermediaries that Iran wishes to de-escalate the conflict?
Yeah.
What have you heard? What have you heard from the Iranians?
They'd like to talk, but they should have done that before. I had 60 days, and they had 60 days, and on the 61st day, I said, we don't have a deal. They have to make a deal, and it's painful for both parties, but I'd say Iran is not winning this war, and they should talk, and they should talk immediately before it's too late.
Let me point something out to you. Israel has killed all of the top leaders in command of the Iraqi Revolutionary Forces, their air force, their ground force, their, quote, naval force. Khomeini appointed a new leader the other day. 4 days ago, he appointed a new leader to replace those who had been killed. This guy he appointed was the closest he still had next to him, and was he considered the guy to take over. 4 days ago, he has now been killed by the Israelis in a strike. They knew where he was. So when Trump says to the Ayatollah, we know where you are, the Ayatollah should take that with not just a sense of doubt, but with a sense of certainty. And they may well come after him. Of course, he may want to go out as a martyr. He sent plenty of other young men and women to their deaths under the call for martyrship on the jihadist movement. Trump has asked Israel to not take him out now. But Trump is also saying, my patience is wearing thin, and I don't want just a ceasefire. I want to end all of this. How many hours? And I say hours as opposed to days. In the meantime, the race to artificial intelligence continues to ramp up on several levels. Some are saying if the U.S. does not become dominant on this front, China will.
Welcome back. A new poll shows 88% of American voters are growing increasingly worried about China and its AI capabilities and how its growth could boost Beijing's military. The report from the American Edge Project shows the breakdown between political parties. 66% of Democrats and 69% of Republicans say they're either somewhat or very worried about China. Joining me now is American Edge Project CEO Doug Kelly. Doug, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. What other takeaways should we be looking at? What do you think of these results? And how do you think the U.S. can gain ground against Beijing with regard to AI?
Yeah, thanks for having me today. Look, those numbers are really powerful, right? The voters understand that China's aggressively executing a plan to become global tech leader, and their focus has been on artificial intelligence. So America has to do the very same thing. In fact, one of the things in our poll, too, showed that a vast majority of MAGA voters were concerned about China becoming the AI leader as well. So these are table setters for members of Congress and the president to say, hey, listen, we've got work to do in boosting and accelerating American edge, in American innovation. And so let's get down to business.
And again, that's the CEO of American Edge, and they are focused on rapidly expanding AI with government backing and support, because we know China is doing that. It's not just an independent business group trying to develop AI in China, or a number of them. It's the government itself, because they want to have control. Do we sit back and let that happen? Again, the American Edge CEO.
In the early days of the internet, the House and the Senate came together and said, look, we want to grow this technology. We want to make sure that American internet standards become the global standards. And so they prohibited internet taxes by the states. Fast forward 20 years, America's internet is the global standard. So we have right now a modern day moonshot moment for the president and the Congress. They can put an American innovation strategy front and center that helps accelerate AI development, that helps build the technology talent pool of the future, that invests in our infrastructure, and also spreads American AI across the globe. If they do those four things, it will fundamentally change the balance of power towards America for the next 50 years. But if we don't do it, China's going to seize that moment.
Yeah, and they're certainly aware of the opportunity. I like the way you phrased it. It could be our moonshot. The moonshot to put man on moon. This could be our moonshot to make sure that we have AI superiority, certainly before China, and stay in the lead even after China advances. Kevin O'Leary is obviously aware of that, and he's also been looking at some of the trade talks with the Canadian Prime Minister and recognizing how that also plays into the advancement of AI.
Now, there's a piece of policy that's happened over the last 48 hours that's starting to really freak me out, Stuart, about AI. We have to let the chips that come out of NVIDIA, that come out of Amazon, AWS, that come out of AMD, we have to let those chips go everywhere in the world because they are the queen bee. You have to think about AI as you got the queen bee, that's the chip, and then the ecosphere around it are the honeybees. There's only going to be two kinds of honey in the world, Chinese honey and American honey. Do you want countries making Chinese honey? Because as we speak, I'm hearing about these deals Huawei's cutting with a new G6 chip that has AI built in. They're going to flood the market with that in every country that we do not allow our chips to go into. That is insane policy. We need to make the honey. Stuart, it's all about the honey. Who makes the honey? Those are millions of programmers that use the queen bee chip to determine how to build out AI. It's got to be American honey. That's the deal.
That is the deal, because we have to have America in control, not China. We've already had too much reliance on China and other countries for things we can do here, do as well, if not better, if the restraints or regulations were cut and we had actually a chance to move forward. But this apparently is such a critical area that even Kevin O'Leary is trying to sound the alarm. He said we need all of these chips to go all over the world and make sure everybody has a chance, and they're using American honey, as he describes it, as opposed to Chinese honey. And even then, we're going to have to be worried about how China will try to infiltrate, taint, poison, contaminate the American honey, if you use that analogy. There is no one listening to my voice right now that is willing to let China have the lead in anything. Maybe I stand corrected. Maybe I have some out there that are so whacked out that they don't want America to succeed at anything. They don't want America to survive. They're all about Chinese Marxist policies, which would mean the death of America. I have no doubt that's probably true. They're probably some of the same ones that are crying out, quit arresting the illegals, you're interfering with our community, as opposed to you're protecting the security of our nation. We will break into that story as we move forward. Lock and load, ready on the right.
You are listening to Larry Connors, USA.
I want to tell you more about Wellington Environmental's dustless blasting services. Wellington can blast paint, grease, graffiti, even stripes off parking lots. Truly amazing and powerful. But can Wellington blast something more sensitive? Yes, Wellington can use dry ice to blast soot and odors off smoke-damaged surfaces right after a fire. Currently, Wellington uses dry ice to clean mold off wood inside a home. Why? Well, dry ice immediately disappears, turns into a vapor. That means no mess to clean up, no damaged surfaces. You need to check with Wellington, always researching and practicing with new, better, faster, safer equipment and products for you. And it's very easy to schedule an estimator for your next project. Call Cindy, 314-644-4600. 4930, 644-4930. Be well with Wellington. McGuire Moving is silver certified, which means they are great at relocating senior citizens. In fact, McGuire is a household name because McGuire understands the stress involved when moving older adults. So if you or family members need help moving, I highly recommend McGuire Moving. 314-241-0600. 241-0600. Get a free in-home estimate. McGuireMoving.com. Back pain? Follow me to Esquire Sports Medicine, where they've got your back. Esquire is the oldest sports medicine clinic in St. Louis. Dr. Draghi and his team of chiropractors can get you back to work, back to life without the pain. New patients usually scheduled within 24 hours. 314-644-0885. 644-0885. EsquireSportsMedicine.com. I've got a great evening planned for you. We start with dining at the Oak Street Inn Lounge in Cottleville. We enjoy sunset on the rooftop, then down to the Speakeasy. Just one visit, you're going to see why I'm always talking about the Oak Street Inn and Lounge. Plus, you might want to plan a staycation, a romantic getaway. Check out OakStreetInnandLounge.com for various events this summer. Oak Street Inn and Lounge, Cottleville. Oak Street Inn and Lounge, Cottleville.
This is NewsTalk STL.
Baby, I got your number. Oh, and I know that you got mine. You know that I called you. I called too many times. You can call me, baby. You can call me anytime. You got to call me.
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
I am demanding full accountability and reimbursement for the local costs incurred, including injuries to local officers and damages caused by the chaos unleashed when the Trump administration recklessly deployed the military and ICE agents into our communities. They are the ones who created this unrest, and they are the ones that need to foot the bill.
How do you come up with such rationale? You don't do it logically. You just dream it up. I think she's had too much tequila. Congresswoman Torres in L.A. saying we need to blame ICE for all the violence we've had in our streets, all the problems, and we should make the government pay for all of this, the federal government, because we didn't have this issue until Trump sent the troops in and summoned up the National Guard and started rounding up illegals. So you want compensation. You want compensation for what you guys encouraged to happen by being sanctuary cities, sanctuary states. How are you going to compensate those who have lost loved ones at the hands of these illegals? Either by accident, drunk driving, I would classify, quote, an accident to some extent. Drugs, possibly by accident, knowing that it was laced with fentanyl, but not caring who took it. And flat out kidnapping, rape, and murder of Americans. Who's going to compensate those who lost loved ones? And what dollar amount do you put on that? We have the left just continues to spin around and not recognize reality. And it's right there in front of them. You would think after the murder of the Minnesota state legislator and her husband the other day, an attempted murder of another Minnesota legislator and his spouse, they would recognize maybe we're bringing some of this on ourselves. But of course, they're going to blame that on Trump anyway. The guy that was doing the crimes that's been charged is an American, not an illegal. But the leftists will find any avenue they can to point out it's all Trump's fault and he has to pay. He has to pay. Perfect examples of that storyline being replicated: Los Angeles Mayor Bass and Chicago Mayor Johnson.
But the real solution of all of this is for the administration to stop the raids. We have heard that these raids might take place for the next 30 days. We don't know how many are going to take place in a given day. And you just think about the disruption to families and the disruption to our local economy.
Yeah, let me just first acknowledge the level of anxiety and fear and trepidation that this administration has caused. You've never seen a society improve or expand under this type of fear. And we're going to continue to resist, and we're going to do it in many different ways, whether it's taken to the streets or to the courts or policy. One of the things that I am very proud of is that we are a welcoming city, which means our local law enforcement do not dub or behave as federal ICE agents. And so our local law enforcement, as we continue to rebuild and expand trust amongst all of our residents, it's important that we hold that line.
Hold the line. And while you're holding that line, you're hurting your own citizens, and they know it. I want you to hear comments from a Chicago woman about the, first of all, before that, some stats on how much Illinois has been spending on illegals.
$2.5 billion. That's how much Illinois is projected to spend on migrants by the end of 2025, according to a new audit. But taxpayers are calling out the governor, J.B. Pritzker, for putting the needs of illegals over his own citizens. Chicago resident and director of the Community Roundtable, Kata Truss, is one of those taxpayers. She joins me now. To me, the key line of the audit is this, Kata. In 2023 alone, total costs outpaced expected spending by over $400 million, enough money to shelter Illinois' entire homeless population for a year. What do you think of your governor prioritizing illegals over your friends and neighbors who are citizens but who are also in need?
Well, I've been very vocal about how I feel about it. I've been very vocal about the fact that this Illinois governor has neglected both our Chicago public schools, our citizens of the city, as well as the state of Illinois. What we are afraid of, what the taxpayers of Illinois are afraid of, is the fact that there is going to be a $3.2 billion budget deficit for the state of Illinois heading toward the year 2026.
That is obvious because they can see on the numbers where it's going. Let me give you another set of numbers briefly. Even before I started rounding up all the illegals in L.A. and elsewhere, before they started actively pursuing them, there's a report out that L.A., ravaged by numerous riots by the leftists at various times, paid out $1.1 billion in overtime hours last year to maintain control. Well, I'm glad that money went to law enforcement officers and their families, but that $1.1 billion just to keep the peace? The Chicago resident says, look, they don't seem to care about Americans.
They continue to double down and make it seem as if they did something to be commended about, and they have not. And the people are going to show them this at election time.
J.B. Pritzker doubling down just last week on your state's sanctuary city policies. Listen to this.
I will stand in the way of Tom Homan going after people who don't deserve to be frightened in their communities, who don't deserve to be threatened, terrorized. I would rather that he came and arrested me than do that to the people of my state.
I would.
Kata, as you know, so much is wrong in that statement, especially the fact that these are not people of his state, but the people of a foreign state that he is wasting your taxpayer dollars on. If I were an Illinois resident, I would be livid, Kata.
And we are livid. And let me tell you something. we are not insensitive to undocumented persons here. We know that it is a struggle. I get people asking me all the time, well, do you think it's wrong for people to want to live the American dream? No, it's not wrong for people to want to live the American dream. But what is wrong is for Americans here in America to not be able to realize the American dream, because we have elected officials who want to do things with our money that does not benefit the people who are paying into the tax bracket.
And here's another area where it's hurting the American public. They will tell you no American will take some of these jobs these illegals do take. It is true about 50% of labor on farms is illegal. But that means 50% of Americans are doing the jobs. And meatpacking companies, the numbers might be similar, up or down a little bit. But let me give you an example of what happened after an ICE raid at a Nebraska meatpacking plant. It opened jobs for Americans and legal immigrants. This was at the Glen Valley Foods plant in Omaha, Nebraska. ICE agents raided this location, arrested more than 70 illegals. The company president said, I use E-Verify on every potential new hire. I don't know if he does or doesn't, but that's his claim. And I was unaware any illegals were at the plant. Now, E-Verify can be defrauded by using a stolen Social Security number, meant to verify the person is legal to work. So it's very possible that was happening. Certainly possible. I'm not going to say it couldn't happen. But then they reported a couple days after the ICE raid, Americans and legal immigrants came into Glen Valley Foods trying to get some of those newly opened jobs. They weren't able to get them because they were occupied by illegals. And they point out that every seat in the waiting room at Glen Valley Foods was occupied with those filling out job applications 2 days after the meatpacking plant became the center of the largest worksite immigration raid in Nebraska this year. And they're looking at meatpacking plants across 7 states that are probably in the same situation. Maybe the employers are truly E-verifying, and maybe they're using false information. We do know this in Florida. Cops busted a gang selling driver's licenses, including CDL, that's a license to drive a commercial vehicle, to 1,000 illegal aliens without knowing if they're capable of driving a tractor-trailer rig. Here's your CDL. Go out and do harm's way. Kill people on the road if you want. And the numbers that were coming out the other day, I told you they were suspect when you were hearing that, well, not that many of the illegals have been arrested or guilty of any crimes. I told you that the other day was a lie. Now we've got proof. Stand by, please.
You can connect with Larry on Twitter at Larry Connors USA.
Question: are you looking to unlock the full potential of artificial intelligence for your business? I want you to meet my friends at PRI Global, named by the St. Louis Business Journal as a leading IT consulting firm. 25 years helping local and worldwide companies. PRI Global has a free survey to determine where your company stands in your AI journey. You simply go to priglobal.ai. priglobal.ai. And I also have a phone number, so get ready to copy that number. And I'll remind you that PRI Global has its own AI lab, creating, adapting, developing, pushing the boundaries for what AI can do for you. Here's the number, 636-689-0545. 636-689-0545. Or visit priglobal.ai. priglobal.ai. Here's great news. Napoli Kirkwood is now open. So that means fine dining right in the heart of Kirkwood. So you have the original Cafe Napoli in downtown Clayton, Napoli 2, Town and Country, Napoli 3 on the streets of St. Charles, right next door to Napoli C, plus Napoli Brothers Pasta and Pizza in the Chesterfield Valley. All of those locations, and now adding Napoli Kirkwood. What a great place to dine. Napoli Kirkwood, now open. Since 1995, Renewal by Andersen has helped St. Louis homeowners upgrade with windows and doors. Now it's our 30th anniversary sale. You'll get $1,995 off every project. No gimmicks, real savings, and the nation's best warranty. The offer ends June 30th, so you don't want to wait. There are some restrictions. Visit rbastl.com. Renewal by Andersen. Superior products, exceptional service. You've worked hard for your money, so protect it. Meet my friend Bob Leslie and ask about the Gain and Retain Plan. Leslie Consulting, 40 years in the St. Louis area as a leader in brokerage and risk management. Call 314-721-0066, 721-0066. Oh, and ask Bob how he was the L.A. Dodger #1 pick. LeslieConsulting.com.
This is News Talk STL.
I am flesh and I am bone. Rise up, ting, ting, like glitter and gold. I got fire in my soul. Rise up, ting, ting, like glitter. Like glitter and gold. Like glitter. Do you walk in the valley of kings?
This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.
All right, so let's break down the facts versus the fiction you were being sold the other day when the stories were coming out that most of the illegals arrested by ICE have not been guilty of any crimes other than entering our country illegally. That is a crime. And some of them entering more than once, being deported and then coming back. But they don't want you to consider that a crime. And they're insisting again, they're peaceful people just trying to come here and have a new life. I believe many of them are. In fact, I'd probably say most of them are. But mixed in with them are the dregs of society, or the criminal mush that we now have under our feet, grabbing at your ankles, trying to pull you and your family down, either economically or physically. With the ICE organization, according to DHS, responded to a CNN report, which I love, because they're not going to let them get away with this kind of lie as they would during the Biden administration. CNN tells a lie, nothing from the administration that will deny it. Not this time. Department of Homeland Security, responding to that CNN report I told you about the other day, suggesting only a very small percentage of illegal aliens taken in by ICE had, quote, serious criminal convictions, citing internal data. Now, I told you the other day that might be true with some serious criminal and knowledge and background of it, or arrest for, but maybe not charged. We don't know, but I was sure, and I was willing to put money on it. There were a lot more than a minor, small percentage. DHS is now putting out a statement. Fake news. Secretary Noem unleashing an ICE gov to target the worst of the worst, including gang members, killers, rapists, and in President Trump's first 100 days, 75% of the ICE agents arrested, or those being arrested by ICE, were criminal illegal aliens with convictions or pending charges. 75%. So it was not, as CNN was claiming, a small percentage. Unless they think 25% is a bigger percent than 75%, which they might. But the fact is 75% of these criminal aliens rounded up, illegals, have convictions or pending charges. It's a lie. We knew it was the other day. But I'm glad that Kristi Noem had the Department of Homeland Security released those stats directly. Do I have them in front of me? Have I checked them one by one? I have not. Am I taking the word of Kristi Noem, Department of Homeland Security Secretary, over CNN? Yes. And I'll do it every damn day with this administration versus CNN. And here's another example. We've got so many of the leftists trying to, like Padilla the other day from California, when he storms into that meeting, Senator Padilla of California, when Kristi Noem is holding a press conference, has not yet started taking questions. And if he wanted to ask a question, he could have come in and raised his hand to say, I want to know why, whatever. We'll never know what he's going to ask. All we know is that he suddenly stormed through the door, frightening her Secret Service detail. They didn't know who this guy is. Didn't know him by name, didn't know him by view. He didn't show any weapons, so they're just trying to control him, manhandling him as he's shouting at her. This is a U.S. senator, and he was doing it because, look at me, look how brave I am. I barge into the meeting held by the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, and I yell at her. You're an idiot. You're an idiot, and that plan was stupid from the beginning. But you're not by yourself. The New York City controller was handcuffed and detained by federal agents just this afternoon, escorting migrants from immigration hearings in lower Manhattan. Here's what was taking place. It was earlier this morning when the New York City controller, Brad Lauder, who, by the way, is running for mayor. Do you sense this was a political stunt? Of course you do. But anyway, he was at 26 Federal Plaza, downtown Manhattan, to observe an immigration hearing. When he walked out of the courtroom, locking arms with an immigrant, an illegal, federal agents moved in to detain the immigrant in the hallway outside the courtroom, and the New York City controller, would-be mayor, asked him to show a judicial warrant. The agents didn't have a warrant. They just took him into custody. So Lauder's press secretary showed a chaotic scuffle as agents whisked the illegal into an elevator and then tussling with the New York City controller and placing him in cuffs. That would be a badge of honor for him. I got cuffed by ICE agents, so he's happy. He made his mark. So I guess he believes that a lot of New Yorkers will like that. I don't think they will. I think New Yorkers already made it clear to the current mayor, we're overwhelmed by illegals. We don't want you putting them in our communities. And every time we turn around, you're dumping them in some low community that is already impoverished, and you're making it tougher and more dangerous. The wife of Lauder said, "This is one more example of my husband's values. This is one more example of what he does and what he will keep doing." And I'm adding to that comment, being stupid and acting stupid. She went on to say, "My husband is a candidate for mayor." Well, that makes you special, doesn't it? He is an elected citywide official. Yes, that's true. A U.S. citizen. Yes, that's true. Has a U.S. passport. I'm sure that's true. And she said, I know in all likelihood he's going to be okay. She's saying this to reporters as ICE agents are taking him out of the area, detaining him. He ends up being let go, obviously, unless they decide to file charges interfering with our job. Every time I see something like this go down, and the left thinks that it's making points for them, it makes no sense. You know, the other day, the Florida sheriff that warned, if you are interfering with ICE agents or our officers carrying out their duty, you will regret it. If you spit in our face, you will be arrested, taken to the hospital, and then the jail. You get the gist? If you try to shoot or harm one of our agents, we will notify your next of kin where to pick up the body, because you will be graveyard dead. Well, sure enough, here come some of the liberals saying, that's nasty to warn these people simply because they're protesting, they could lose their lives. He didn't say if you're protesting. He said if you spit on our officers, if you try to strike us, if you try to harm us, you throw bricks or bottles or point guns, you will be graveyard dead. Is that clear enough for you? Can I go out and protest? Yes, you can. Under your First Amendment rights, you can. But First Amendment rights do not include throwing Molotov cocktails, do not include throwing items to harm officers, do not include even spitting at them. They're not going to kill you for spitting at them, but if you're throwing something that might harm them, or you pull out a gun on them, then you will be graveyard dead. Can't make it more clear than that. And yet you got some of these wimpy leftists out there that sounds nasty. Why would you even say words like that? Why would you guys applaud and call for someone to kill President Trump? Now, here's something that is really a kicker. A member of the United Nations, part of the UN Commission on Human Rights, wants to tell us, our nation, how we should handle illegals. What a joke.
In the United States, the arrest and deportation of large numbers of non-nationals, including to third countries, raise serious concern over respect for their rights. As people protest against these developments, I urge the authorities to respect the right to peaceful assembly and to uphold human rights in law enforcement, including by refraining from any resort to military force when civilian authorities are capable of maintaining public order.
Where the hell were you when Hamas was taking Israeli hostages and holding them in tunnels? Where were you then saying, Hamas, you should not do that. That violates UN principles. You should treat them humanely. You should let them go. And if you've already raped or killed them, you should be apologetic. That's our UN commission. The UN was established originally with the intent of bringing nations together, and had viable, legitimate opportunities to do so. But it's been hijacked over the years, and it continues to show stresses, strains, breakage. It's imploded just as much as the Titan submersible vehicle did. When they got to a certain depth, it crushed like a can. The UN is useless as it is at this point. The UN also overseeing the World Health Organization, which saw no issue with COVID, said it was all okay, and covering up for China. We need to reassess how much money we're giving them, make the other nations put more into it, just as we are with NATO. On the war front, Israeli Prime Minister is stating the hour of liberation for the Iranian people is near. He said those Iranians who want to have a new life and be free of the Ayatollah, your liberation is near. We're about to leave the current theocratic regime shattered. Netanyahu was speaking to an Iran international group and saying that Israel's twofold mission is to eliminate Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile threats, both of which he described as existential. He said the consequences could be that the regime is shattered, because really, what do they have? What do they truly have? He described the Iranian regime as one that thrives on terror, intimidation, public execution, oppression as tools of control. We all know this. We've seen examples of it, and especially for women. And you LGBTQ crowd, you would not be safe in Iran right now. Not under this leadership. He says all of this is based on their image of invulnerability, of unmatched power. We are cutting that power down to size. And he addressed the Iranian people directly, calling for freedom. He said, a light has been lit. Carry it to freedom. Carry it to freedom. It is up to the people of Iran. Your hour of liberation is near. All of this, of course, as the Israeli military operations continue to target Iran's weapons infrastructure. The Israeli leader portrayed the campaign as not just a defense of Israel, but a broader stance against tyranny. By acting to defend ourselves, we're also acting to defend others in the Middle East and even in Iran itself. It's hard for the people of Iran to rise up. They have no weapons, no capability, unless there is an overthrow inside the mullahs and the Revolutionary Guard. And the way things are going now, they're not going to have anybody to lead the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. The latest one was appointed 4 days ago, after the last was killed by Israeli airstrikes. Good. The latest one died, just being appointed 4 days ago, also killed. So they know where the Ayatollah is. Just a matter of when and if. Remember our pledge, one nation under God.
You can follow Larry on Larry Connors USA Facebook. Larry Connors USA Facebook. This is Larry Connors USA. Larry Connors USA.